everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that I think a lot of you will find pretty relevant to, well, everyone who drives at least. We're taking a look at the future of auto repair, and you've sent in a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
Yeah, it's a global story for sure.
Yeah, we're talking industry newsletters all the way from Belarus. We've got articles about what's happening with U.S. car repair trends, even some details about, like, specific companies and how they fit in. So it's a lot to unpack. A bunch of the reports you sent mentioned how much the global car repair market is expected to grow.
It is a really interesting time for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, some of these reports are predicting it'll jump to like $828.6 billion by 2030.
Yeah, huge numbers.
But then there's this other projection that's closer to $559.9 billion. Still an enormous amount of money, but those are pretty different. There's one of them just way off.
You know, it's not necessarily about one being right and one being wrong. It's just that there's so much in flux right now in the industry that it's genuinely hard to say for sure.
So, like, what's causing so much uncertainty?
Well, think about it. On one hand, you've got more and more cars on the road every year, which you'd think means more repairs, right?
Right, that makes sense.
But at the same time, the cars themselves are becoming much more reliable.
So it's like more cars, but they break down less often?
Exactly. And that actually leads to lower demand in the aftermarket parts industry, which is a huge chunk of this whole thing.
Oh, interesting.
Like you sent over some stuff about O'Reilly Automotive.
Yeah.
Big player in that space. And even they've seen a bit of a dip recently, which just goes to show how these trends are already starting to have a real impact.
So it's kind of like a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if your car's not breaking down, that's great for you as the car owner, but maybe not so great for the repair shops?
Well, it depends. That's where things get really interesting, actually. Because while those more traditional repairs might be down, there's this whole digital revolution happening in auto repair at the same time.
Okay, a digital revolution in auto repair. Now, I got to hear more about this.
I know, right? It sounds kind of wild. One of the sources actually called it a digital gold rush, which I love. They said the market for these digital services could be worth 500 billion euros by 2030.
500 billion. So we're talking about like way more than just a gold rush. That's like a whole meteor shower of digital gold. But what does that even mean, digital services in the auto repair world? Our mechanics never even sent me like a funny meme or something.
Haha, not yet, maybe. But think about it, all the tech that's packed into modern cars now. You've got sensors everywhere, software controlling everything,
Right.
telematic systems that are collecting and transmitting tons of data. All that opens up all these possibilities for diagnostics, predictive maintenance. You could even do some repairs remotely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's all about using data to know exactly how healthy a car is in real time. Like, you could spot problems before they even happen.
That's kind of cool.
It is pretty futuristic, but there's a catch, and it's a big one. All that data is creating a battleground around access.
Oh, so like who gets to see the data?
Exactly. Some car manufacturers, like Volvo is a good example, they're moving towards these closed systems. Basically, they lock out independent repair shops from getting the data they need.
Oh, wow. So you'd almost have to pick a brand and specialize if you were a mechanic.
It's definitely a huge concern.
Yeah, it sounds like it could make or break you.
It's just one example of how much technology is shaking things up in the auto repair industry.
It's wild to think that our cars are basically driving data centers now. But even beyond all the data, what does all this new tech mean for the mechanics themselves? It can't just be about fixing engines anymore, right?
You're absolutely right. Cars are practically computers on wheels these days.
Yeah.
And that means mechanics need a whole new set of skills. A lot of your sources call them like tech-savvy mechanics.
So what does that even look like in practice? What kind of skills are we talking about?
Well, think about telematics, for example. That's the technology that lets cars send and receive data, right? It's getting more and more common. But now mechanics need to know how to read all that data, maybe diagnose problems remotely. You might even have to reprogram software.
Wow.
That's a far cry from the old days of just like listening to an engine and knowing what's wrong.
Yeah, totally different. And then you've got electric vehicles coming into the picture big time, too.
It's a seismic shift for the industry. One of your sources, the expert from Belarus, actually said that shops need to be preparing for EV repair now.
Yeah, makes sense.
They're not waiting around for the future. They're saying it's already here.
Definitely seems like it.
Yeah.
What are the sources saying about, like, what's tough about servicing electric vehicles and what the opportunities are?
I think the biggest thing is just the specialized knowledge you need.
Right.
And the equipment. EVs use high voltage systems, which can be seriously dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Plus, the whole powertrain is different. So mechanics have to learn a whole new set of, how to diagnose and fix things.
It's like starting over in a lot of ways.
It's a steep learning curve. But there's a flip side, right? Because the shops that do invest early in training and equipment,
Yeah.
they're going to have a big advantage as more and more EVs hit the roads.
For sure. Get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
It's like any kind of big change, the people who are willing to adapt, they're the ones who end up doing well.
Exactly. And this all ties into another trend. We're seeing more and more automation.
Oh, interesting. So, like, are we talking about robots fixing robots now?
Kind of. Think about things like automated diagnostic tools, robotic arms giving you a hand with repairs. There are even AI systems now that can analyze a ton of data and predict what might go wrong with a car.
Wow. Okay, so the future of car repair might not look anything like it does today.
No doubt. And all of this is happening while we have this, interesting situation with the mechanics themselves.
Right. You mentioned earlier that the sources are all talking about a shortage of skilled mechanics. It seems weird to think about a growing industry, but not enough people to do the work. What's going on there?
It's complicated. But your sources all point to a few things. Like, in the US, you've got a ton of mechanics who are getting ready to retire.
Okay.
But at the same time, you don't have enough younger people coming in to replace them.
So you've got all this experience walking out the door.
Yeah.
And not enough people to learn from them and step into those roles.
And it's not just a US thing either. Your sources from Belarus talked about the same kind of thing. A real challenge finding and keeping good mechanics. So it seems like a global issue.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So how do we fix it? How do we get more people interested in becoming mechanics, especially with all this new technology that they need to learn? It's a tough one, for sure. I mean, you've got this huge demand, but people aren't exactly lining up to fill those jobs. Is it like a pay thing? Do people just not think it's a good career, or there's something else going on?
It's probably a mix of things, honestly. Like, in the US at least, becoming a mechanic means you need pretty specialized training.
Yeah.
And it can cost a lot to get all the tools and certifications you need.
Right, that makes sense.
And I mean, the average salary is okay, something like $43,000 a year, which isn't bad.
Right.
But it's not exactly like glamorous, is it?
Right.
And there's all this hype about tech jobs and stuff these days.
Yeah, you kind of wonder if there are enough people who want to work on cars when everyone's thinking about building the next app or whatever.
It's a good point, and it actually makes me think about that difference in pay we talked about before between the US and Belarus.
Right, yeah, huge difference.
It really shows how different this whole thing looks depending on where you are in the world. Like, you've got US mechanics making over 40 grand a year, but in Belarus, the sources you sent say even the experienced ones might only be getting something like $700 a month.
Wild.
It's a big gap. It kind of makes you think about the bigger picture, the economy, all those other factors.
Totally. So no easy answers then. It seems like no matter where you are, finding and keeping good mechanics is going to be a big deal for the auto repair industry moving forward.
Absolutely. And that brings up something else we need to talk about, the customer.
Right. Because none of this matters if the people who are actually getting their cars fixed are having a bad time. What are the sources saying about what it's like from the customer's perspective?
Honestly, it's not pretty. One of the reports you sent said that 76%, think about that, 76% of car owners have felt pressured into paying for services they didn't really need. And almost as many, like 73%, think they've been overcharged at some point.
Wow. It's no wonder everyone hates going to the mechanic.
I know, right?
It's like you always feel like you're getting ripped off.
It creates this huge trust issue. But, where there's a problem, there's an opportunity, right? This is a chance for businesses to figure out how to be more trustworthy, more transparent. And there are already companies doing that, which is cool.
Oh, yeah. Like what? Give me some hope here.
Okay, well, remember those online platforms we talked about? Wrench, Your Mechanic, all those.
Yeah.
They're all about, like, giving you a price up front, being really clear about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Using tech to give the customer more control, basically. Like, you can see how much a repair costs before you even book anything. You can read reviews. You can even, like, track the mechanic's location on your phone.
That's amazing. It's like they designed those platforms specifically to solve all the problems we just talked about.
That's the idea. Use technology to build trust.
I love it.
And it's not just the online stuff either. Even the mobile repair thing where the mechanic comes to you, that can make people feel more comfortable too,
Right.
Because you're right there. You can see what they're doing.
But what about that Belarusian expert? They didn't really seem too worried about any of this, did they? It's like they thought people just want their cars to work, period.
Haha, yeah. They definitely had a more, old school view of things. They basically said that people find car troubles annoying and just want a quick fix without having to think about it too much. Which, I mean, I get it, but I do kind of wonder if they're missing something, you know?
Yeah, it's like times have changed. People expect more now.
Exactly. It's not just about fixing the car anymore. It's about the whole experience.
Man, I feel like I need to get my head checked after all this. So much to think about. It's amazing how much the auto repair world is changing.
It is a lot to take in.
So, just to sum up for everyone listening, we talked about how much this industry is growing, the impact of cars being more reliable, the digital side of things, all those new skills mechanics need, that shortage of qualified mechanics, and then how businesses need to keep customers happy too.
And I think the big takeaway is we've only just scratched the surface.
Right. Like we talked about telematics, AI, even robots working on cars. But what about the really big question? What happens when self-driving cars take over?
That's the billion-dollar question, right? Will we even need mechanics the way we think of them now, or will it all be about software and algorithms?
It's mind-blowing. Well, that's definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. It's been eye-opening for sure.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, buckle up. The future of auto repair is going to be a wild ride.